Imagine you're offered two drinks. They look exactly the same. They're both in identical glasses. One is just plain, clean water. Nothing special. The other has a little something extra in it. A chemical that, for a little while, makes everything feel okay. It quiets the noise in your head. It makes the world feel softer, warmer, a little less sharp. You can have as much as you want of either one at any time of day. They are always there for you. Which one do you think you'd end up drinking most of the time? The answer feels obvious, doesn't it? Our brains are built to seek pleasure and avoid pain. It seems like a simple choice. Most of us, if we're being honest, would probably find ourselves reaching for the glass that offers relief. But what if that obvious answer is wrong? What if the choice you make has almost nothing to do with what's in the water, and everything to do with the room you're in when you drink it? Back in the 1970s, a Canadian psychologist named Bruce K. Alexander had a question that really bugged him. For decades, the common wisdom on addiction came from experiments that were, when you stop to think about them, a little strange. The setup was always the same. A scientist would take a single rat and put it in a small, empty metal cage, the kind of box you see in a lab. It's often called a Skinner box. There's nothing to do. No room to play, no dirt to dig in, no other rats to snuggle with or fight with. There is just you, the four walls, and a water dispenser. Then, they'd introduce a choice. The rat would get 2 water bottles. One contained ordinary water. The other contained water mixed with a powerful drug, like morphine or cocaine. And almost every single time, the rat in that lonely cage would start drinking the drugged water. It would drink it more and more, compulsively. It would choose the drug over food, over everything. Many would continue until the drug destroyed their bodies. For years, the conclusion seemed clear, and it was terrifying. These drugs were so powerful, so chemically addictive, that they were basically irresistible. Once they get their hooks in you, they don't let go. The drug was the villain. The drug was a monster that, once unleashed, could hijack any brain. This idea shaped everything. It shaped how we saw people who used drugs as weak-willed or morally flawed. It shaped our laws, which focused on getting the monster off the streets. But Bruce Alexander looked at these experiments and saw something else. He saw a flaw in the story. He wondered if we weren't really testing the power of the drug at all. Maybe, he thought, we were testing the power of the drug on a creature that was going crazy from loneliness and boredom. What would happen, he wondered, if the rat had a life worth living? So he decided to build a different kind of cage. In fact, it wasn't a cage at all. He called it Rat Park. It was a paradise for rats. He built a huge enclosure, about 200 times the size of a standard lab cage. He filled it with cedar shavings, which rats love. He put in painted walls with trees and mountains. There were boxes to hide in, tunnels to explore, wheels to run on, and plenty of delicious food. And most important of all, there were other rats. Lots of them. Males and females were put in together. They could play, fight, form bonds, and do all the things that normal rats are supposed to do. They had a society. They had a world. Then, once the rats had settled into their wonderful new home, Alexander introduced the same choice from the old experiments. 2 water dispensers, one with plain water and one with water laced with morphine. What happened next changed the conversation about addiction forever. The rats in Rat Park barely touched the morphine water. They tried it occasionally, sure, a little sip here and there, like a person might have a glass of wine at a party, but none of them used it compulsively. None of them became addicts. They were too busy. They had friends to see, mates to court, games to play. They had full, interesting lives. With a good life to live, the drug lost its power. But Alexander took it one step further. He wanted to know if this paradise could be a cure. So he took a group of rats and put them in the lonely, miserable cages first. He let them drink the morphine water for weeks until they were physically dependent on it. They were, by any definition, addicts. Then he moved these addicted rats out of their cages and into Rat Park. They were still given the choice. The plain water and the morphine water were both there. The twitching, miserable, drug-dependent rats stumbled into paradise. And something incredible happened. Once they were in a healthy, stimulating environment with a community around them, they weaned themselves off the drug. They went through the pain of withdrawal, but on the other side of it, they chose the clean water. They chose community. They chose life. The conclusion was stunning. It flew in the face of everything people thought they knew. Alexander's work suggested that addiction wasn't a chemical hijacking. It wasn't a moral failure. It was, perhaps, an adaptation. It was a way of coping with a life that was unbearable. The driving force of addiction wasn't the drug. It was the cage. It's a great story. It's clean, it's powerful, and it feels right. It gives us a clear villain, the cage of isolation. And it gives us a clear hero, the park of connection. It's a story that has been told in books, documentaries, and speeches all over the world. It offers so much hope. But what if the story we all love to tell about Rat Park isn't the whole story? The world of science isn't about perfect stories. It's about messy data and hard questions. And the Rat Park study, for all its power, has faced some hard questions. When other scientists in other labs tried to run the experiment again, they got confusing results. Some found similar effects, others found weaker ones, and some couldn't get it to work at all. Getting the same result over and over is the bedrock of science, and for Rat Park, that bedrock was a little shaky. For reasons that are still debated, Alexander's original papers weren't published in the big-name, top-tier science journals. They were published in smaller ones, which made it easier for critics to ignore them. For many years, the study was mostly forgotten by mainstream science. And then there's the bigger problem. The one that's harder to talk about. We aren't rats. Our cages are so much more complicated. A human being's world isn't just about the size of their room or how many friends they have. Our cages are built from things that are harder to see. Genetics can be a cage. Some people are simply born with a brain chemistry that makes them more vulnerable to the pull of certain substances. Trauma is a cage. A childhood filled with fear and pain can create a hole inside a person that they spend the rest of their lives trying to fill. A doctor named Gabor Maté, who has spent his life working with people struggling with addiction, often says we should not ask why the addiction, but why the pain. He sees addiction not as the primary problem, but as a tragic attempt to solve a deeper problem of suffering. Mental illness is a cage. Living with chronic depression or anxiety can make a life feel like a prison, and a drug can feel like the only key. This helps explain one of the most difficult questions of all. Why can two people grow up in the exact same difficult environment, maybe even in the same house, and one falls deep into addiction while the other doesn't? The simple cage model doesn't fully explain this. Our inner worlds are just as important as our outer ones. And if we say addiction is purely about the environment, are we saying there's no choice at all? Anyone who has recovered from addiction, or knows someone who has, talks about the moment they had to choose to fight back. They had to choose to ask for help, to do the hard work, to face their pain without a chemical crutch. Their environment didn't make that choice for them. They did. So the clean, simple story of Rat Park starts to look a little less clean. It's not wrong, but it might be incomplete. So, should we just throw the story out? Should we decide it was a nice idea, but the real world is just too complicated? No, not at all. The true importance of Rat Park was never about proving a perfect scientific theory. Its real power wasn't in its data. Its power was in the question it asked. Before Rat Park, the main question was, what's wrong with this person's brain? After Rat Park, a new, much better question became possible, what's wrong with this person's world? The experiment acted like a new lens for a camera. For decades, we had been using a microscope, looking for the tiny flaw inside the individual. Bruce Alexander gave us a wide-angle lens, forcing us, for the first time, to look at the whole picture. To look at the context, to look at the environment. It suggested that maybe addiction wasn't a problem that lived inside a person's skull, but a problem that lived in the space between that person and the world they inhabit. The experiment wasn't the final answer. It was the beginning of asking the right questions. Once you start seeing the world in terms of cages and parks, you see them everywhere. A human cage isn't always made of metal bars. Poverty is a cage. It traps people in a cycle of stress and desperation with few healthy ways to escape. A soul-crushing job with no meaning is a cage. It drains you of your life force, day after day, leaving you empty. Shame is a cage. The feeling that you are fundamentally broken and must hide your true self from the world. The great psychologist Carl Jung talked about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny and push into the darkness. Addiction is often a desperate attempt to quiet the cries of that shadow. And chronic loneliness, that might be the smallest, strongest cage of all. In our modern world, we can be surrounded by millions of people and still feel completely, utterly alone. For decades, our response to addiction has been to build more cages. The war on drugs, at its heart, was a cage-building project. We saw a person in pain, and instead of asking about their cage, we blamed them for their attempts to escape it. Then we put them in a smaller, colder cage called a prison cell, stripping away their community, their purpose, and their dignity, the very things they needed most. But if we can build cages, we can also build parks. A human park is not a physical place with swings and benches. A park is any system that fosters connection. It's a friend who listens without judgment. It's a family that refuses to give up on you. It's a doctor who treats you with dignity. It's a community that says, "We see you, we value you, and you belong here, even in your pain." A park is a society that offers people a safety net, meaningful work, and access to mental health care. It's a place that invests in libraries, community centers, and public spaces where people can simply be together. Building parks is harder than building cages. It's slower, it's messier, and it requires us to feel empathy for people we had been taught to fear. But it's the only thing that works. The thinking behind Rat Park is slowly changing the world. We are starting to see a shift away from punishment and towards something called harm reduction. It's a simple, compassionate idea. It means meeting people where they are, not where we wish they were. Providing clean needles isn't encouraging drug use. It's a way of saying, your life is worth saving, even if you are not ready to stop using today. Providing safe places for people to use drugs is not an endorsement. It's an acknowledgement that dead people can't recover. It is a fundamental choice to build a bridge of connection to someone in a desperate place instead of a wall of judgment. We are seeing more treatment programs that focus not just on stopping the substance, but on rebuilding a life. They help people find stable housing, get job training, and reconnect with their families. They are, piece by piece, trying to build a park around a person who has only ever known a cage. This isn't easy. There is no magic wand. Human beings are complicated, and so is their pain. A better environment doesn't guarantee recovery, it just makes it possible. It gives a person a fighting chance. We are a long way from getting it right, but we are finally starting to understand that if you want to help someone who is drowning, you don't yell at them for being wet. You throw them a lifeline and help them build a raft. We are slowly learning to build more rafts and fewer cages. So we come back to that first choice, the 2 glasses of water. The old way of thinking saw the problem in the glass. It was all about the chemical, the substance, the temptation. A newer, more compassionate way of thinking understands the problem isn't in the glass. It's in the loneliness of the person reaching for it. It's in the emptiness of the room they are in. For too long, we have waged a war on drugs. But maybe we have been fighting the wrong enemy. The story of Rat Park, with all its flaws and all its brilliance, suggests a different path. It suggests that the cure for so much of our suffering doesn't come from a pill or a policy, but from each other. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection.